This week, the Clarets are away at Arsenal to once again try and get a very stop-start season off the ground. This is the Nona Never podcast. Hello and welcome to the Nona Never podcast. Listeners, after a very emotional and quite haphazard analysis show a couple of weeks ago, I'm back to steady the ship. Wood has gone, Clarets are playing football, we've regained some control and some excitement levels have been dampened at Nona Never Towers. And we are back to record an analysis show. And we are, of course, looking at a fantastic point away on the road for the Clarets at Arsenal. I am delighted to be joined by my two favourite panellists, Rich Steele and Tom Whitaker. Starting with my absolute favourite, Rich. Hi.
Tell you what, George won't be happy with that, will he? George and Adam and Robbie.
I know, I can't win with you lot. So to my actual real favourite, the one that everybody knows is my favourite, Tom, how are you?
Hi, Natalie. Very well, thanks. I'm glad to see that Newcastle haven't met your release clause yet.
Nope, that's true. I am not deflecting to No Tyneside podcast. They can do one. Although I did see an absolutely hilarious tweet, and forgive me, I should have screenshot it so I could give somebody some credit. But somebody on our Twitter Clarets feed earlier on today was reacting to some general really great praise for Connor Roberts the weekend, and it basically said like, so when are we expecting a bid to come in from Newcastle for him, which was quite amusing. So listeners, we have got quite a bit to talk about this week. We're going to analyse that, just get some reaction really to that point away at the Emirates, of what is many fans hailing as a return of the strong jaw, which was very pleasing to see. We're going to have a look at what's going to happen next, which is, of course, the third time is a charm rearranged fixture for Watford and the implications of them carrying on their managerial merry-go-round earlier on today. And then finally, we're going to look a little bit concerned at the closing stages of the January transfer window. Time is running out. Bodies are not through the door. Rumours are aplenty. And we are also hit with some headlines that maybe Alan Pace and ALK don't quite have the financial clout to be able to bring us what we need. So, where do we start? Well, I'm going to start right at Mr. Tom Whitaker, who did the hero of hero trip and went down to the Emirates at the weekend. So why don't you kick us off, Tom, with your immediate reaction to that point at the Emirates?
Yeah, I think everyone who's there, who was at the ground, sort of felt, the longer the game went on, the more like you felt we were going to get something. The first half, I don't think we were under too much pressure. A couple of moments, Saka cut in from the right just before half time, but we kept them fairly quiet. There was a period when they started to get on top in the middle of the second half. That save from Pope when he gets down low to his right to keep at Smith Rowe. Unbelievable save that. I don't, how we saw that so late, and to get enough around to get it around the post as well. That was tremendous. And then obviously the Lacazette, the missed open goal. That was a big let off. But apart from that little spell in the middle of the second half, I think they ran out of steam. They ran out of ideas, Arsenal. And we defended really well. The rear guard action was solid. Don't think there was anyone who had a bad game. The back four were back to the best and could have even nicked it at the end with them couple of counter attacks. So if we look at it just in isolation of the game, a really good performance and a well-earned point at what is still, even though they're not what they were, it's still a difficult place to go, and it's not somewhere we've got many points in recent history. So yeah, very, very pleasing performance and result, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting to hear you talk about Nick Pope. Obviously, he put in a fantastic performance, and considering that there's been some question marks of his early form this season, particularly we expect coming back from that long injury and some concerns about making sure he's up to sharpness, he ended up making the Premier League's team of the week. And Rich, I think one of the common themes to come out of that weekend's game, starting with Nick Pope, but the whole of the defence, is the recognition that defending is as much of an art form in football as attacking is, and it gets overlooked so many times. But Burnley, when they are on it, are one of the absolute leaders of the defensive masterclass.
Yeah, just agree with what Tom said. They had about 15 minutes where they really put us under intense pressure, but we managed to get through it, which you've got to do in the Premier League. That save from Pope from Smith Rowe was fantastic.
Yeah,
because it come from like a different type of corner too, where they laid it back on the floor. Yeah, terrific save. I think Danny Higginbottom the well-known Stoke Scottish. I think Danny Higginbottom, if I'm right, played one cap for Gibraltar. I might be wrong there.
Really?
But
that's knowledge. Tom's nodding.
So yeah, and he said, like, there's so much emphasis on attacking play, especially since Guardiola and Klopp have come on the league and pressing and different things like that. But we defended our box fantastically well. I know I've been on this podcast and I've said before how I think at times we've been pressing too high and we've been caught up the pitch. That was back to what Burnley do best. We defended our box excellently. We looked in a real compact shape. It helps in some ways because we almost allow teams to get crosses into the box and we play quite compact. But it did help that Arsenal not got that real target man. Say if that's against, possibly helped us when we played Chelsea. Say if they had a Lukaku, it might have been a different story. But it was just a really good defensive display. Vidra and Jay, they were feeding off scraps, but considering they've both been struggling with injuries and illness, they worked really hard as well. I thought Connor Roberts was so refreshing in the back four. Martinelli's been on absolute fire for Arsenal recently. And, Lowton's played well for us this season, but he does lack a little bit of pace. And there was 2 or 3 occasions where I think Martinelli would have got past Lowton and he didn't get past Roberts. And it just helps your back four and just get back set when your fullback holds them up. Peter struggled initially with Saka, I thought, first half, but then he really came to grips and he was really quiet. Saka, second half. And you know what? There has been a bit of doom and gloom recently. Obviously, the podcast we did a couple of weeks ago was a little bit mental, and it just gives you it just gives you a bit of hope, doesn't it? Now going into the rest of the season, that the fight's still. I've questioned it a lot, and I think that shows that performance. That performance shows that players haven't, in my opinion, still haven't been giving it absolutely everything in enough games this season, and they'd absolutely give everything. Everyone was superb in that game for me. I can't fault anybody at all.
Yeah, no, I agree. And actually, Ben Mee's tweet today, I don't know how many people have seen it. He kind of alluded to that as well. Yeah, he said, we've got the stomach for it. But again, that makes me kind of feel that maybe that was lacking a bit in the last few games, like the start of this season. They've got it there. I've just realised I keep doing this. I called him Connor Richards again, didn't I? Connor Roberts. Every single time we talk about him, he needs to not be in this squad because otherwise he will forever be known as Connor Richards. As soon as you said Connor Roberts, I was like, I definitely didn't say Connor Roberts. Poor lad. One player who has been criticised quite a lot recently, Tom, particularly fans who are feeling stung a little bit from Chris Wood deflecting and obviously Tarky wanting a move away at the end of the season. He just become a bit of a scapegoat of recent times, quite unfairly, in my opinion. Just because he makes a couple of mistakes, because he's slightly out of form or the team's not playing very well, suddenly we need to sell him because his head's gone and he doesn't want to be here. But he was exceptional at the weekend, absolutely exceptional. And for me, we cannot afford to sell him till the summer.
No, definitely not. I mean, I think probably been in the minority, but I've not seen anything that suggests that he doesn't want to be here or that he's not trying. I think, to me, people know that he's going to leave in the summer. We all know that. And I think they're probably working backwards from that. And anything that he does wrong or any mistakes that he makes, excuse me, it's his head's gone because he's going at the end of the season. For me, if he didn't want to be here, we've seen him kick up a fuss, and when he was at Brentford and refused to play, could have easily done that, I guess. Again, I don't. For me, he's not had his best season, sure, but I don't think it's a lack of effort. I think he's made mistakes. That Leeds game, he plays a bad pass. His problem's always been for me that he thinks he's better with the ball than he actually is. But in terms of the basics, heading it and kicking it and blocking people, yeah, he's a very good defender, and he showed that on Sunday. Like we've said, a proper Burnley performance. That's proper. Everything you associate with Tarkowski was there. I think it's very short-sighted to a few people were saying, if the money's right, sell him to Newcastle. No. To me, again, it's the message you send, to sell to a relegation rival. You're going to strengthen them because they're really bad at the back. If you look at the goal difference of us compared to the other teams that are down there, I know we've played a few less games, but ours is miles better. And it's because, although we haven't got a lot going forward defensively, we are a lot better than the other three down there, in my opinion. And, if we were going to weaken our defence and strengthen a relegation rival, it'd be a really bad move, in my opinion. People say, well, Collins can come in. But the problem is, if Collins gets injured or me gets injured, do you want to do the rest of the season with Long at centre half? Good player, but he's not in the same class as three for me. So yeah, I think he's anyone who was doubting his commitment for the rest of the season, I think he's laid down the marker with that performance. You know, we might lack a bit of quality, we might not be good enough, but for me, I don't think you can question the attitude or the desire. I think we'll have that until the end of the season at the very least.
Yeah, amen to that. Rich, the other player who's been criticised quite a lot this season, scapegoat number 2, also had a much improved performance at the Emirates, and that is, of course, Dwight McNeil, the poor lad who's been carrying the hopes and expectations of the whole of Burnley for about 4 seasons now. Looked back to himself again. He was running at players. He was a bit quicker, and he maybe lacking, I think you said this in the thread earlier, lacking a bit of finesse at the end product. But again, same with Tarky, a much improved performance.
I feel uncomfortable with the word scapegoat too. To be honest, I think it's just people having an opinion to say, you know what, someone's not been very good. What I would say, going back to Tarky, I think Tom did articulate it well, and maybe the lack of effort's the wrong word. Maybe a lack of edge is the right word. When you're giving lazy balls away, like you did against Leeds, against Southampton, that's a mentality thing. It's, I'll try and play that pass. There was a couple of times yesterday, Tarky could have maybe messed about with it, but he booted it in touch. And Dyche said, we need to get back to the basics. And I think he's been told. McNeil yesterday, in my opinion, it backs up my points that I've been saying. McNeil yesterday gives so much more than he's done it in a lot of games this season. And I don't get, maybe there's other factors involved in that. He looked genuinely motivated for the game. He was carrying the ball 90 odd minutes. He was running forward, could have scored. I'm not bothered if he missed. Well, you'd have loved him for him smash it in the bottom corner. I'm not too bothered, me, that he misses. It's that effort. That's the intensity. That's what I want. Giving 100%, 110% for the badge. If you're giving 95% in the Premier League, you're falling short when you play for us. And I still stand by my opinion. I know Tom disagrees with me, that he's not been given his absolute everything. And when I mean everything, I mean blood, sweat, tears, giving his absolute, I don't want to swear, but, you know, running his knackers off. And he was doing that for the cut. And he was running, and he did that yesterday. He was absolutely superb. That's the McNeil I want to see for the rest of the season. So, like I just said before, who knows that what I finished the last podcast, by saying Burnley are normally at the best when they're a wounded animal. Obviously, the Wood transfer stung everybody. To me, it seemed to galvanise the team a little bit. In my opinion, I know we got a great point against Chelsea. That it's a long time since we put in that battling performance. Yeah. People were closing down players. We were getting yellow cards. I love to see that. I seen Lennon, getting a yellow card at the end. Some may saying it's a bad tackle. It was a bit daft, but that's the effort and that's the intensity I want. And that's what we need to do to stay up this season. So fair play to McNeil and fair play to Tarkowski. They were excellent yesterday, and we need to see that game in, game out now. We've got, I think, 20 games left, 20 cup finals to save our season, but so much better. And it's given me that little bit of hope that, you know what, the group is together and we're going to fight till the last kick.
I feel like we could just end the podcast there, to be honest. It's like, what a way to end it. Yeah, we're done, listeners. It's fine. We kickstart our season. Speaking of cards, particularly of varying degrees of colour, it would not be a fixture against the Premier League leaders for whinging, and that would be Arsenal and their ridiculous fan base. Despite the Clarets now going, is it 111 games without a red card, which is, I saw this today on Twitter, that we are the league leaders. We're the record holders at the moment for, not record holders, that's not true. We are the league leaders for 101 games without a red card. In second place behind us is Chelsea. Do either of you know how many games they've gone without a red card? Go on, Rich.
Is it 20?
Yeah.
I think I did read it.
Yeah, 20. So we are 111 games and the closest club to us is 20. That tells you all you need to know. But despite that, Burnley are, of course, a horrible physical side that need to be dumped out the league because we're going to break somebody's leg. Westwood's tackle. Red card, yellow card. Who's going to come in first? Tom, you come in first. Did we get away with one, or was it a fair challenge?
Yeah, it's interesting because in the stadium at the time, don't think anyone, home or away fans, thought that there was even a possibility that he was going to give a red card. You get the usual whinging from the Arsenal fans on the bench, but it never felt like one where they're going mad that that he's only given a yellow. I haven't seen it back since. I thought it was quite interesting. I watched Match of the Day too, featuring yourself last night, and I thought it was interesting that it wasn't even like worthy of inclusion in the highlights. They didn't even mention it, they didn't even show it. Yeah. The only sort of controversy I've seen about it is some 12-year-old Arsenal fans on Twitter sharing a screenshot where his sort of legs hovering above, his foot's hovering above his ankle or whatever. You can take an out of context screenshot and it can look very different to what actually happened. I haven't seen any video clips of it, and I suspect that the reason for that is probably that if you watch a video of it, it's not actually that bad and it's not a red card. So Arsenal fans have got a very strange sort of persecution complex when it comes to refereeing decisions. I don't think they
Which
can
is
quite
ironic beyond words, by the way.
Yeah, I don't think they can quite get their head around the fact that their team is a lot dirtier than ours, and they'll try and sort of justify that in whatever way they can. But I like I say, there's nothing that I've seen apart from a couple of grainy screenshots that suggest that it should have been anything like a red card. So I'm not too worried about that one.
No, I completely agree, and I have seen it since, and it's just not a red card for me at all. They're an interesting side of Arsenal, and I think one of the reasons why they infuriate me is that they just, oh God, this is such a sweeping generalisation, but they epitomise, for me, everything that I dislike about the Premier League. And you look at the performances yesterday, and it's like they played some very pretty football, but it was just side-to-side nonsense. It wasn't going anywhere, and I think, they just dive a lot and fall over, and then they whinge. And when it's done and dusted, there's a point blank refusal to blame anybody else but themselves. And that comes from their managers as well. It's a really odd setup. And then there's this sense of self-entitlement from the Arsenal fans and the whole Arsenal TV generation. And it's just, they've almost become a real parody of themselves. So I'm quite glad really that this narrative about Burnley being a physical and dangerous side, which seemed to be spilling over a bit at the beginning of the season, has been, cut out a little bit. And I would have been really annoyed if we'd have lost that red card record away at Arsenal. That would have irritated me. What did you think? One of the things that was obviously missing, Rich, and I think this is probably where AFCON has ended up messing with us a little bit, because of the poorness of Arsenal's performance and the lack of any intensity or willingness to break down our defence. You kind of feel like with either Wood and or Kone in that side, we could have turned that point into a really valuable away win. For all the graft and the hard work they've done, a front two of Jay and Vidra just doesn't quite have the killer instinct, does it, that we need to start scoring?
I think we'd have lost 2-1 if Wood played yesterday, to be honest. I'm only joking. Looked at my
face and I was like, where's he going with this?
Wood's that slow. We wouldn't have been able to press anyone. I seen a Newcastle fan call him an army tank because he turns that slowly. Excellent. On Twitter the other day. I'm gonna back Wood now because I'm allowed to, because nobody on the podcast can call me anymore for having a go.
Very true.
Listen, I thought Jay and Vidra were excellent. I thought they were both fantastic. This is the one thing I'll say about Wood is that they were feeding on scrap. That he has, that he's not had loads of service. He's missed some big chances, and Jay and Vidra didn't really have anything. But I thought they ran the channels well. I think they linked up when they could. I remember there was a 1-2 between Jay and McNeil when McNeil went down the wing. There was a lovely little bit of movement where Vidra did like a little bit of a sidestep touch and released Roberts with a lovely through ball, but put a poor cross in. My opinion is our midfield's poor going forward. Yeah. We've got no pace in midfield. We've got no midfielders who can break the line. I said it before about Westwood and Brownhill. Who are, you can't knock them because they give absolutely everything, but they've got like no ball manipulation in tight areas to counter. And I think the last 10 minutes, you're seeing it. We've got a lot of opportunities to counter. maybe that's where you can question McNeil's decision making. He went to shoot on a couple of occasions instead of playing the ball across goal, especially once when it went over the bar for a goal kick. We're crying out for creativity in the midfield area. I think if you play like that yesterday, we'll pick up points because we could nick games 1-0 too. And obviously Cornet is going to come back. It's just massive. I know we're going to lead into it. It's just a massive week in the transfer window, isn't it? We've been linked with good players, but like you said, you're just lacking that pace when you want to break quickly. This is the reason why a team like Palace is, I don't know how many points they're ahead of us, maybe 10, 11 points, might be a little bit more. It's because they're going to come, there's times when they're going to be under pressure. But then when you've got players like Elise, MacArthur, who can manipulate the ball, Will Hughes, who can manipulate the ball, then you can pass it to Elise, you can pass it to Zaha. You've got pace up front with players like Edouard and Conor Gallagher, obviously, who's been a great signing. You're seeing the goal they scored against Brighton, which is a fantastically well-worked goal. And that's why we're currently bottom of the league in a big way, is, in my opinion, because of our midfield. It's a broken record, isn't it? I think with Burnley fans, we keep talking about it. But we're massively desperate of that. And on another day, we could have maybe done it on the counter-attack, but that's something Dice has said, hasn't he? There's been too many times this season where we've either missed key chances or the final pass has been poor, and that's very, very difficult for the manager to change that when that's the players you've got, when that's the card you dealt with. So it's going to be interesting if we do address that.
Well, let's jump straight into that then, because I think there isn't really anything else from the Arsenal game that I wanted to cover. We've covered most of the topics. Obviously, we've noted what a fantastic point it was and a great performance. But as Rich has just massively highlighted there, Tom, we are in now a season-defining week. We're not even kicking a ball of football. We have got less than 7 days to bring in, at a minimum, a centre-forward, a central midfielder, and a creative midfielder. Creative midfielder is a minimum? I'm going to say yes. Some people might say just the midfielder and the centre forward are minimum. We have had all sorts of rumblings. And I think, as one of you said before the game started, I think it was Rich, we seem to be flicking between players who just don't want to come to us because they're based on just Europa League level players, and grafters like Andy Carroll, who have got no resale value and are not going to improve the side hugely, but will get us through the season. So I guess let's start with that. Rather than specific positions, Tom, where does your head and your heart sit with regards to the kind of player we need to be trying to sign? Which side of the camp do you sit on? Are you resale value and investment, or are you just get us what we need to survive this season?
I think obviously the priority is what we need to survive this season, but there's no reason that they can't be mutually exclusive. I mean, you look at Cornet, he's a massive improvement on what we had, but he's also going to get us probably double what we paid for him when we sell him. So I think the main thing that I think we're seeing from this window, as opposed to previous windows, is that the net's being spread a lot wider. So, in previous years, it would have been like, oh, there's no rumours or interest all window. And then you'll get Andy Carroll on a free on the 31st. Now, it might end up being Andy Carroll on a free on the 31st. But I think the fact that we're going in for different players, we're looking at different leagues, we're making bids, whether it's just a case of it being a bit more publicised or more stuff getting leaked with pace, I don't know. Maybe that's what it is. That they're making the noises and they're wanting fans to see that they are doing things behind the scenes. But I think personally, it looks as if we've got a bit more now in terms of. So I think I'll use Aaron Ramsey as an example.
Yeah.
So that's going to be really difficult to do, obviously, for a lot of reasons. Even if we were in mid-table, I think we'd be doing well to get Aaron Ramsey, and obviously the position that we're in. The fact that he's on loads of money at Juventus, the fact that there's going to be, you'd think, bigger and better clubs who would be interested. You look at that on paper and you go, well, there's no chance of that. Why are they wasting time with that? But like I said, there's nothing that stops you bidding for Aaron Ramsey and Andy Carroll at the same time. Now, I wasn't expecting us to get much done before the deadline day, because we're always waiting, and it's always the reason we do our business late, is because we're waiting for other teams with bigger budgets to come in. and sweep in, and that's just how it is with our budget and the way our club is. But if we get to deadline day and we haven't got a striker or a number 10 or whatever over the line, maybe, just maybe, using Aaron Ramsey as an example, he's not getting games for Juventus. He wants to play for Wales. They've got a chance of being at the World Cup in December. Get some games under your belt, get fitness. Maybe if nobody else comes in for him, because I read that he'd prefer to go to Crystal Palace and they're not interested. So let's just maybe, you're Aaron Ramsey on the 31st. You're thinking, well, I'm kicking my heels here in Turin for the next 5 months. Do you know what? I'm just going to go to Burnley and I'm going to get a few months worth of games. And if they go down, it doesn't matter to me because I'm gone. It's a remote possibility for sure, because I'd imagine that a better team will come in the interim. But why not have that iron in the fire? You can keep Andy Carroll on ice, and then say if the Ramsey deal does fall through, if someone else comes in, you can come in and get Andy Carroll. To me, at least that's better planning than what we were doing before. You've got a bit of ambition there. You've got the idea to bring in someone who is better than what you've already got. But at the same time, there's a backup plan there, perhaps if it falls through. To me, there seems to be a bit more joined up thinking. And I think probably the way we'll be thinking about it is we'll try and get someone who ticks all the boxes, resale value and or improves the team. And then if it does get to the point where we need stopgaps, I'd be a bit more confident that we've identified people in each category and we've got things in place to get someone in each category than we have perhaps in previous windows. So to me, the noise is coming out. They do seem a little bit haphazard, but maybe that's the thinking behind it. I know people are getting worried that we're this far into the window and not signing anybody, but not many clubs have. I mean, even Newcastle, they've got money to burn and they've only got 2 players over the line, and one was only because of the release clause. So it's not as easy as it seems. I was always expecting it to go to the wire, and I'll judge it after that. But you're right. If we don't get 2 or 3 in, I think just wanted to make a bit of a point. Obviously, with the Arsenal game, 0-0 was a good result, and we played really well. But we've had results like that earlier this season. It reminded me very much of the Wolves game. 0-0, dogged performance, good point. But then the next game is Newcastle away. It's a 6-pointer, and we don't turn up and we lose. So it's no good going to Arsenal, putting in a battling performance during 0-0 if you don't turn up for the Watford game. And I think everyone can see from the performances, and the game on Saturday was a good example. If we don't get these reinforcements up top, if we don't get some creativity, if we don't add something in midfield, if we don't get another striker, then we really are going to struggle. But I'll wait until the window's shut before I get too panicky or judge.
Definitely. I felt like that was some letting off some steam there, Tom. It felt like there was some built up points that you wanted to make there. I loved it. Rich, there's been some names that we're just not used to seeing connected, as Tom just literally talked on there. Out of, obviously we lost, I'm going to try and pronounce his names and I'm going to embarrass myself here. So is it Azmoun? Sardar Azmoun, is that how you pronounce it? The guy who went to Leverkusen instead of coming to us. That was a whirlwind 12 hours where we thought we were getting a really impressive signing, and he went to Leverkusen instead. We've had Orsic, Mislav Orch, is that how you pronounce that? He's a winger at, is it Dynamo Zagreb? Zagrets? Honestly, listeners, you can laugh at me all you want. My pronunciation of names is so bad, but give me some credit, I'm trying. He's a very exciting prospect, but apparently Alex James was reporting in Lancashire Live that him and Fofana, the boys are nodding their heads at me, listeners. This is great. They're supposed to be both more summer targets rather than January. Couple more closer to home. Jack Fitzwater from Livingston's been touted, and Steve Mooney from Huddersfield, a striker as well, have also got in the press today, as well as the never-ending signing rumours about Andy Carroll. Is there anything in that, Rich, that excites you? Is there anything from that makes you think that we're going for realistic targets, as Tom just mentioned?
It excites me, but it's like me going on Instagram and asking Rita Ora for a date, and it's just not going to happen. So there's a little bit in. I'm really torn on this. I am quite cynical sometimes. Are we just putting these rumours out in the press to make it look like we're actually trying? But on the flip side of that, we actually got Cornet in, so it's like this is where it's a little bit difficult. you see these names linked, and it's like Fofana's linked, and then you're like, well, he's been the best midfielder in France, and he's probably going to go to a top 6 club. And then it's like Orsic has been like one of the outstanding for Zagreb, and Tottenham and Arsenal have been linked with him, and West Ham. Oh, sorry, I think he's got a hat trick against Tottenham, and like Arsenal and West Ham have been linked with him, and you're like, it is exciting, and you see that Amzoon one, and obviously like Friday morning it comes out, and you think, all right, this could be one that happens, and next minute he's holding a Leverkusen shirt in it. So, and then it comes back to the Steve Muniz come in, and you're like, Jesus, what are we down to, like list W and list X on the target list? If
There's a healthy amount of cynicism, I think, here.
That's just the reality of it, isn't it? And at one point Tom made, which I said to you off air, Natalie, was that Newcastle's got all this money, and they're struggling. They signed Trippier, which seems to be teed up for a while. They signed Wood just simply because they met a release clause, so there's nothing anybody can do if the player wants to go. And January is difficult. It seems there's not a lot of strikers out there. With Cornet coming in, I could almost cope with us getting 2 real quality midfielders, because I think maybe then with Carroll, there's another option in the squad.
That's interesting.
But then it's difficult because then you're like, well, Cornet's not a natural striker, and at some point you're going to think that this trend of him scoring worldies is going to stale off a little bit, and then you're missing a proper number 9, and you've got 3 lads in the squad who's not scored a lot of goals, and Vids has obviously struggled with a hernia. I personally really like Vidra as a footballer, but he's not a natural goal scorer, which is Wood wasn't a good footballer really, but he could find the net when he was in form. So yeah, Tom's talked a lot of sense. You've got to wait till the end of the window. I think similar to what it was last time. We signed Collins way in advance, which seemed a pretty easy deal to do, but I think Cornet and Roberts come in the last 2 or 3 days, and the rumours started about Barkley, and seemed like we could have done a deal there. So I think it'll really go down to the last 2-3 days of the window.
Yeah.
I remember a manager said a couple of years ago they might as well just have the January transfer window for a week, because there's so much wasted time. And yeah, I think players
focuses people's minds.
Yeah, and then I think what's been difficult is because of the COVID situation being so rife in January, teams are not going to want to let players go on loan.
That's a really good point, actually.
Maybe from some of the bigger clubs. That may change as the COVID settles down and you want to get the players out. But yeah, it's going to be a really interesting few days. I was hoping there was going to be a bit of news today, but it's been really quiet on the transfer front. So yeah, I think everyone's just trying to stay patient, but I think we're just waiting for that tweet, aren't we, from someone to say, oh, Burnley's agreed a medical and a player's coming. And because at the moment it seems we're doing a lot of fishing, but we're not getting anything on the end of the line.
Yeah. Well, I think one point that I know, Rich, you particularly feel very passionate about, so I am going to drag us down this path because I think it's something that we need to explore. We can't ignore the news reports that have been around for the past couple of, probably for the last week, I think, with some quite heavy suggestions that Pace and ALK don't have the ability to make these signings because there's no money there. There's concerns over the structure of the club, the structure of the leverage buyout that was done. Just to give you a little bit of a break, because I know you've got some strong views on this, Rich, I'm going to come to Tom first. I know where I stand on these, Tom, and I tend to refuse to give an awful lot of airtime to headlines that I see in the likes of the Sun and the Daily Mail. But Rich I can see Richard's concern here that we are getting these leaked reports in the press about our financial situation, and that coupled with as yet unsuccessful transfer window. Is it fair to say that fans are panicking a little bit or worried in any way? Where do you sit with this?
I don't think it's baseless to be at least a little bit worried about the financial situation of the club compared to what it was a year ago, because a year ago we didn't have any debt and now we have got debt. And obviously the model that's been used to buy us isn't a good thing. You wouldn't want that, whatever happens. So there's no there's no sense pretending that that isn't something that would concern anybody. But I don't think there's any reason for an immediate panic. I think I'd be a hypocrite if I said that I didn't want it to happen, because I think ultimately a change was needed at the top. Obviously, if we could have got someone who's worth £1 billion and money was no object to take us over, then that would have been brilliant, but it wasn't happening. So we had to take what we could get. And I think what we get, we've got debt on the club now, of course, which isn't an ideal situation, but the situation before was that we had a load of money in the bank sat doing nothing, and it was never going to be used to do anything apart from, it seems, by the club. So in that sense, I think what we really needed was new owners who were going to do things in a different way, take the club in a different direction, and that's what we got, for better or worse. So if we do get relegated, then I think we're going to find it harder to come back up than if we hadn't had the takeover, perhaps, because we're going to need to be mindful of the debt that we've got. We might have to sell one more player than we would have done otherwise, something like that. But I think there's probably an argument to be made that we've probably have maybe hung on to one or two players for a bit too long. A club of our size, selling players at the right time has got to be probably part of the mindset. You think, you look at what we did with Gray, doubled our money on him after a couple of years. We've got great money for Michael Keane. Maybe there's an argument that 2 years ago, when we were in a better position on the pitch and financially off the pitch, maybe then we could have cashed in on someone like Tarkowski or Pope, got a good bit of money for them, and then reinvested it, had we done that wisely. So I don't think it's necessarily the fact that they put in in that Sun report that all the players are up for sale at the right price. I don't think that's ever not been the case, has it? So I think things like that are probably just alarmist, putting little things like that just to go over the top a little bit. So yeah, I wouldn't say anyone's got baseless concerns, but at the same time, I think if you look at the majority of football clubs in the league have got at least a certain amount of debt. I don't think we've got an amount of debt that, if we get relegated, then that's it. The club's going into liquidation. You're probably going to have to sell a few players, but if we get relegated, we're going to have to sell a few players anyway. Will it hinder our ability to come back up a little bit? Maybe financially it will, but then on the flip side, have we got owners now that are going to, like I say, expand the net as to where players we're looking for? Are we going to have more chance to buy better players, stretching the finances a little bit, and then more importantly, getting more value for money in different markets? So swings and roundabouts for me, and I'm not too worried about it. It is what it is. If we get relegated, we would have got relegated with Mike Garlick in charge, and Dyche would have left as well. So if we do get relegated, I think we'll keep Dyche, and it'll be an interesting window. So maybe in a few years down the line we'll regret it, but I think a lot of it will come down to what's on the pitch, not off the pitch, and I don't think we're in a much worse situation than we would have been otherwise. So yeah, I'm quite tranquil about it all at the minute.
Yeah. Rich, I know this is something that you've been paying quite close attention to, and actually out of all of the None and Never team, you've probably been our expert on this, because you've been paying much more close attention to this than maybe the rest of us have. And I think one of the points that you've talked about is whether or not Alan Pace has earned yet some what seems just unwavering amount of loyalty and trust without actually having to prove that yet.
Yeah, I've been listening to Tom again talk really well about it. I've been really trying to consider my points, both positive and and I won't say negative, but concerns about this whole situation. My opinion is, obviously reports have come out in the Sun and the Daily Mail, which I wouldn't normally put attention to, but there's been rumours by there's been articles and concerns by more reputable journalists, from the Athletic and on the financial side of it, who have raised their concerns. My particular worry isn't the here and now or in the next 2 or 3 years. I think if we look at it, we have had a lot of hope on this podcast. I still think we have got a very good chance of getting relegated. We're going to get, I think, parachute payments last for 3 years. We've still got sellable assets. But what happens 5, 6? I know this is quite a negative viewpoint, but I want to try and be realistic too, because it's happened to a lot of clubs. What happens 5-6 years time when we're not in the if we're not in the Premier League, we don't have parachute payments. We've not got big money players to sell anymore. We don't have a lot of income coming through the commercial side of the club or from the fan base. I don't understand where Alan Pace and ALK are going to pay this debt from. I know they're looking for other outside investors, which may help. But if we're paying, I think it's 8 million or so on debt, I don't understand how we're genuinely going to pay this off. Me and Tom, Tom's hometown is Derby. They pushed the golden ticket to try and get to the Premier League, and it didn't work. My hometown's Wigan. Slightly different situation there, but the devastation that it causes to communities, to jobs, to livelihoods. And I don't understand how people are just putting absolute blind faith into a man who we know very, very little about. He's quite a mysterious man, in my opinion. I think he talks a good game, but I think anybody can come on camera and say what people want to hear. Tom made a point there, which is correct, that we was going nowhere under Garlic. But I think Garlic was that bad that Pace took over, and all of a sudden he's the new Jesus, he's the new Messiah, and we don't really know a lot about him. He's got no money. Really, he don't own a business. He doesn't have any money himself. At least Garlic actually had a business. He didn't have a lot of money in football terms, but he had his own money, as did Kilby. We have no idea where ALK Capital's money's coming from, where Alan Pace's money's coming from. No one's been able to tell that. I know he's got a legal agreement with John B and Mike Garlic about the actual interest. I'm not going to try and say that word, about the actual finer points of the detail of the deal. But he released a statement by saying last week, "Oh yeah, don't worry about it. Everything's fine. The club's fine. We're going to pay off the debt." And everyone's like, "Oh, Alan Pace has said this and that. We've got nothing to worry about." He's actually not said anything. If somebody who was accused of murder just come out and said, "You know what? I didn't do it. I wasn't guilty," you wouldn't fully believe them, would you? So I don't understand why not everybody. There's a lot of fans that seem to just have this blind faith. I hope that we ride off into an American sunset and this and what we do really works and we're really successful and we buy into this obviously model he's got about these analytics and everything like that. And we stay in the Premier League this season. I think if we stay in the Premier League, we'll be fine because of the way the leverage buyout is. If you're successful, because we're paying interest back off our own club's account, it'll make the club wealthier. But if we're not getting income in, it'll make the club poorer. So my worry's not for now; it's for years, even 5, maybe even 10 years down the line. And I think the possibility of the worst could happen. I think it's so shocking of us always being in a situation like Derby. People just don't actually want to confront that because it is so bad.
But we are a long way away from that, though, Rich. That's potentially, so maybe that's part of it.
But football is long term. I'm 28, my dad's 63. I want it when I have children for people. It's because I care so much about Burnley. I want to be able to take my children and my grandchildren to watch Burnley. I know we're getting a bit exaggerated about it. I'd go watching Burnley in League One and League Two in the National League. I'm not really. If we're in the Premier League for the next 30, 40 years, great. But my concern's not now. Nobody can answer that question of what happens if we go down and parachute payments run out in the next 5 to 10 years. I don't understand where the money's going to come from.
But how's that different though from and the answer to this isn't but because of the debt. If ALK and Pace it is, but if all it does is it shortens the length. If Garlic hadn't have sold to Pace and ALK, fine, we'd have had some money in the bank as a buffer, but that would have been used up very, very quickly to plug that gap in the income. So maybe it takes a year longer, but we're still in that situation with Garlic at the helm where the club's got no money. It's still got operating costs to do it with no income and no parachute payments, but we've got Garlic at the helm who's got no way of getting out of it. So I wonder whether, and I'm just offering this as a suggestion, I wonder whether that optimistic approach about Pace is because there is an acceptance that whilst the end result may not be any different to what Garlic would have been under his watch, at least we have somebody that's got more creativity, more contacts, and more commercial nous about them that can actually try and generate something that might see us improve. I wonder whether that's where that optimism comes from. It is for
Definitely,
me.
and he's done a lot of good. 90% of what he's done so far has been massively positive. You go around the stadium, he's had a lick of pain. We've had the Burnley women's team. I know Natalie, obviously that's fantastic for you. I know we have a lot of female supporters who I'm sure that's a huge thing for. With, and ultimately last summer transfer window we did really well. So I really honestly I don't want to come across like I'm anti-Pace because I'm not.
No, you're not doing. You're not at all.
And I genuinely think he's a good guy, and I think his heart's in the right place. But just because your heart's in the right place doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to work. And these, all these articles that every single journalist has put out could be nonsense.
Yeah.
But there's normally a little bit of smoke.
Yeah.
There's normally a little bit of smoke with the fire, and I'm not going to say who it was, but somebody who quite in the know says if Burnley's in the Premier League or kind of a bit of a yo-yo team, the club will be absolutely fine. But there is a real worry if we get stagnated in the Championship about what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But listen, let's just try and focus on the next 7 days. 6 days obviously after today are absolutely huge. I think if we get 2 or 3 good players in, I think it gives us a real chance. I think if we don't, I think we're still going to really struggle.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, the main priority is the next few months of the season.
Good. Well, I think that leads us on to quite a good opportunity, Rich. I'm going to task you with being our expert on ALK and pace and the financial model at the club. If you can keep an eye on that for us, we will come back to you at some point in the season if there are any further, if that smoke gets a little bit thicker or there are more reports doing, then do keep an eye on us for that, because we will be calling on you to try and do it. But I think, honestly, Rich, I think the angle that you've come at that in this blind faith in a man we don't know anything about or didn't know anything, never heard of him 12 months ago, however, 14 months ago, is a really valid point. And I think maybe it's time that we reassess this at the end of this transfer window and see what the fans' view is then. So that's going to be on your shoulders. That's your role for the rest of the season, is to keep an eye on that, Rich, that you can be our finance reporter. Very quick one then before we leave. Rich, we got a winter break now, hilariously, even though we've not played football for about 25 weeks. We're going to a winter break. I've got no idea what the team's plans are for going away anywhere or staying or what we're going to do. But our next game is, quite frankly, a huge one, because we are playing a home tie against Watford. No Dennis, after he spectacularly got himself sent off, which was very great of him. But on the flip side, we don't have Josh Brownhill, and we probably won't have Cornet back then either. Watford have today sacked Ranieri because that's what they do best. So there is going to be somebody else in the dugout for that. If you're Dyche, what's your approach to that Watford game? How do you drown out the noise and the pressure that's coming around that fixture and get the best out of that squad?
Yeah, firstly, you made a couple of good points. I think Dennis is a huge miss for them. I don't know if you watched the Watford-Norwich game, Natalie, but Watford were comfortably, for me, the better team in the first half. They actually looked a class above Norwich, and Dennis was at the forefront of that. And he seemed to have lost his head a little bit since since Nigeria accused Watford of barring fans. I thought that was some legal term. I think it's just some jargon that the Nigerian FA have seemed to pulled out. I was looking it up for some kind of legal obligation. It just seems like
it's
a great saying. I think unless Ivory Coast get to the final, I think Cornet will be available.
Yeah, I think so too. Actually, I've just been looking at that.
I know we don't say it, but fingers crossed Salah gets an hat-trick on Wednesday. But listen, we've got to go all out to win.
Yeah.
Like Tom made a great point. We've had some really good results this season. We drew away at Wolves, who were flying. Got a great point at Chelsea. And we need to get Turf Moor rocking. This is another. Loads of people have said on Twitter, let's get cheap tickets for that game. Yes. I'm not bothered. You'll get the odd fan who'll be like, well, I pay X amount for my season ticket. Why should a non-season ticket
happily subsidise that?
Away, a $5 or whatever. Just get people in the
ground. Give them for free. Get in.
Yeah, get to, we're talking about, we've been down on attendances this season. I know there's different factors, COVID, etc., but get the crowd in, Saturday night under the lights at Turf Moor. We've got to go full-blooded at them. We will miss Brownhill because I think Brownhill gives us a lot of energy, but he don't give us actually like real quality on the ball. Who knows? We may have a central midfielder. We may have a couple of new signings with Cornet back. Imagine if we have a couple of new signings with Cornet back. What a lift that would give the feel of the stadium. It would give everybody a massive lift. So I think it's the biggest game I can remember for a long time. I know we had some big games last season, but I felt we was always just a little bit above the bottom three, that they weren't as big as this one. It's an absolute huge game, and
yeah, it is.
A loss would be absolutely heartbreaking, and that I wouldn't want to be on Twitter that Saturday night. But a win would leave us. No, a win would leave us in a really good position with those games in hand.
Yeah, definitely. Tom, sorry, I did actually mean to come to you first, and then I didn't. I was swept away by Rich's monologues about pace, and I was on a Richard Steele train going west. So sorry, I should have brought you in then. The point I extract from Rich's comments there is that to go an all-out attack and to be really positive from the outset, not something that we see a lot of from a Daesh side, and we have seen it before in a relegation battle or a 6-pointer where there's some nervousness and he's gone defensive and he's tried to keep it a tight game and not lose it by getting caught on the counter and things like that. If there's one game that Daesh has to just go out there, this is it, surely. Do you think he can do it? Do you think he can push them?
I think there's more than one way to skin a cat. I think we'd be better served to play to our strength. Well, and for me, like what we're good at is defending. So, I mean, Rich made the point, that Norwich-Watford game, Watford were the better team in the first half, and how did it end? They lost 3-0. So if we go in at 0-0, then, let's not worry. Let's worry about what the score is at full time. It's like with this transfer window. We've not signed anyone on the 21st, but wait until the 31st, and we'll see how we are. So I'd be a bit nervous if we come out all guns blazing and started pushing everybody forward, because that's when our midfield looks vulnerable to the counter attack. So, if we keep it tight, then that won't be the worst thing in the world. I think the big thing with the approach will be, what's the squad going to look like then? Because the problem, I suppose, to keeping it tight is, you saw, I think for both sides on Sunday, there was nothing on the bench to bring on. So if you get 70 minutes and it's 0-0, what's the plan B? Now, if we can bring on old Andy Carroll for the last 20 minutes, that might be a good plan. Or if we get a little nippy French winger or somebody, then that'll be a good option. But it's very much going to depend on what the squad looks like then. But for me, we don't necessarily need to go out and slap them about 4-0 and be 3-0 up in the first 10 minutes. We need to play to our strengths, need to keep calm, and however we do it, the result is the most important thing. But we can't be drawing that game. We can't be losing that game. It is a must win.
Excellent. And I'm going to leave it on that. Listeners, how do you feel about Watford? We've got a couple of weeks now to build up to this game. Let's not get too scared. Let's not lose ourselves. But we're really interested to hear what you guys think. How do you juggle the squad with Brownhill being out? Do you think there's such a thing as a new manager bounce? I don't think there is. I think it's been proven that there isn't one, but obviously there's a concern there. How wonderful a piece of karma would it be if we end up playing this rearranged fixture and Cornet plays and Dennis doesn't, after some of the tactics that Watford adopted back in December? That would be something, wouldn't it? Let us know how you're feeling ahead of this Watford game. You know how to get in touch with us. You can tweet us at NoNoNever. You can leave a comment on our Facebook page, or you can email us at podcast@nononever.net. My thanks, as ever, go to everybody who's contributed to making this podcast, from first and foremost to Rich and Tom for giving up their evening and giving such valuable insight into everything that's going on, to producer Matt for editing this and getting it out there, to our musician, whose name I always forget, who gives us our music royalty free. I'm so sorry. Thank you anyway. And the wonderful producer Matt will credit you in our socials. But last and not by no means least, you, the listeners, for downloading and listening to this episode. Your support is very much appreciated, and we would not be here without you. Dave and I will be back the Friday before the Watford game to give you the next episode of the preview show, and we will look forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, take care of yourselves, take care of others. I've been Natalie Bromley. This has been the No Nay Never podcast. Until next time.